Most people trying to eat better are still hungry 2 hours later, and they cannot explain why. They are following the advice, buying the right things, tracking the right numbers, and still arriving at mid-morning or mid-afternoon with a kind of hollow urgency that quietly ruins the rest of the day. In the ancient world, ordinary laborers, people who worked from first light until the heat became unbearable, carried a single drink made from fermented grain, water, and sometimes vinegar, thickened just enough to move slowly through the body over hours rather than minutes, and that drink was common enough that it barely earned a mention in the texts that recorded what people consumed. What that drink did, in plain human terms, it was hold a person steady through the kind of physical and mental demands that would leave a modern worker reaching for something sweet by mid-morning, because the fermentation process broke down the grain in a way that released its energy slowly, without the sharp climb and crash that follows most of what people eat today. And the loss of that particular quality, that steadiness, is not a small thing, because entire working days, across generations, were built around the assumption that a single cup in the morning could carry a person until late afternoon without collapse. Jesus drank it on the cross, offered it by a soldier who treated it as ordinary. And somehow, somewhere between that world and this one, we stopped knowing what it actually was. The failure is worth naming precisely, because it is not the failure most people assume it is. It is not a failure of discipline. It is not a failure of knowledge, at least not the kind of knowledge that gets measured and tracked and entered into apps. The person who wakes up early, eats something reasonable, and still finds themselves hollow and distracted by 10 in the morning has not done something wrong. They have done something structurally incomplete. The food they ate was real food. The quantity was probably appropriate. The problem is that what they consumed released its energy in a window that was too short for the morning they were trying to get through. And once that window closed, the body began signaling urgency again. Not because it was starving, but because it had nothing left in reserve to draw on. That quality, the extended release, the slow, steady presence of nourishment moving through the body over hours rather than in a single surge, is what modern eating has largely lost. Not because the knowledge disappeared overnight, and not because anyone made a single large decision to abandon it. It disappeared gradually, across generations, as fermentation gave way to processing, as grain was refined rather than prepared, as the goal shifted from sustained working energy to immediate palatability. What replaced it tasted better, was faster to produce, and required nothing from the person consuming it except opening a package. What it did not do was hold a person steady through a long morning. This episode is about one specific thing that was lost: the fermented grain drink that ancient laborers, soldiers, farmers, and traveling workers carried as their ordinary provision. Not a recipe from a feast, not a luxury, not a medicine. The everyday drink of people who needed to stay standing for a long time, and who had found, through generations of practical experience, exactly how to do it. Recovering that drink is not complicated, but understanding why it worked and why its loss has left a specific, nameable gap in how modern people experience their days is worth taking seriously before we get to the kitchen. There is a particular quality to the early hours of a working day in a hot climate, before the sun has fully cleared the horizon and the air still holds some memory of night. The ground is dry. The tools are heavy. The body is awake but not yet fully warm. In the ancient Near East, in the fields outside villages, and along the roads that connected towns, in the workshops and construction sites and harvest rows that filled ordinary life, this was the hour when a person prepared themselves for what the day would ask of them. Not with a meal, not exactly, with a drink. Something carried in a vessel, clay, or sometimes leather, sealed against the heat. Something poured out or passed without ceremony, consumed in the way that water is consumed, not savored but used. The vessel might have sat out overnight, the liquid inside still slightly cool from the night air. When it was poured, it moved more slowly than water. It had color, something between pale gold and cloudy gray, depending on the grain and how long it had been working. It smelled of fermentation, that particular sourness that is not unpleasant but unmistakably alive, the smell of something that has been transforming rather than simply sitting still. The person drinking it might not have thought about any of this. It was simply what you drank before work. It was what your father drank, and his father before him. And the woman in the next field was pouring the same thing from her own vessel right now. What makes this moment significant is precisely its unremarkableness. There was no ritual around it, no instruction required. It was produced at home, carried to the field, consumed when the day's demands began. Children grew up knowing how to make it. Elderly workers drank it alongside young ones. It crossed the lines of wealth and poverty in a way that more elaborate food did not. Because the ingredients were simple, the preparation was slow but not skilled. And the grain that went into it was the same grain that everyone already had. The person who drank it did not know why it worked in the way it did. They did not need to. They knew only that it held them. That the stretch from first light to mid-morning did not produce in them the kind of collapse and grasping urgency that arrives so reliably for so many people today. They worked. They kept working. The morning passed without the hollow center, without the hand reaching for something sweet, without the concentration unraveling at the worst possible moment. Whatever was in that vessel, it was doing something that nothing most of us drink in the morning is doing now. What was in that vessel was not complicated. At its core, it was fermented grain, most commonly barley, steeped in water and left to ferment for a period of time that could range from a few hours to several days, depending on the temperature, the local custom, and what was available. The result was not beer, though the distinction matters and deserves a moment. Beer in the ancient world was typically brewed for strength and flavor, filtered or strained, often flavored with herbs or other additions, and produced for drinking rather than for sustaining a workday. The grain drink carried by laborers was something closer to a working preparation. Thicker, less refined, sometimes left with much of the grain suspended in it, soured rather than sweetened, and mixed with water in proportions that made it mild enough to drink throughout the day without any of the effects of a stronger fermented beverage. In Roman contexts, this drink was called posca. It was the common ration of soldiers, not the privileged drink of officers. Vinegar, already fermented, already soured, was often added directly to water and grain to accelerate the process or to preserve the mixture in the heat. And this is the version that appears most clearly in the historical record. Carried in amphorae on military campaigns, standard issue for men who needed to march long distances and arrive still capable of fighting. In Hebrew and Greek-speaking cultures of the same period, related preparations existed under different names. Grain-based drinks that were soured, diluted, and consumed as daily provision rather than as celebration. What fermentation does to grain is worth understanding, not as chemistry, but as transformation. Raw grain is dense with starches that the body must work hard to break down. Cook the grain without fermenting it, and those starches become more accessible. But the work of digestion still falls largely on the body in a relatively short window. Ferment the grain first, and the microorganisms that have been active in the liquid begin that work before the grain ever reaches you. They break the starches open. They convert complex structures into simpler forms. that move through the digestive system more gradually. And because much of the grain remained suspended in the liquid rather than being filtered out, the drink had a thickness, a physical weight, that water and juice and even most modern beverages do not have. When you drank it, something substantial entered your body. Not a sugar rush, not a light rinse, but a slow-moving preparation that your gut would work through over the course of hours rather than minutes. The smell was the first thing. Sharp, alive, slightly tannic. The way a jar of sourdough starter smells when it has been active overnight, or the way a good vinegar smells when the bottle is first opened. In the vessel, the drink might have looked murky, the grain particles still moving through the liquid. It felt heavier on the tongue than water, slightly coating, with a sourness that was not harsh but present. The kind of sourness that makes the mouth work, that signals to the body that something real and prepared is coming. Going down, it settled differently in the stomach than a light drink does. It sat there with some substance. Not the leaden weight of a full meal, but the quiet presence of something that intended to stay a while. This is the thing that is easy to miss when we think about ancient food. Simplicity did not mean poverty of effect. Grain and water and fermentation time. 3 things, and what they produced together was something the body recognized as serious provision. The body that drank this in the early morning hours was making an agreement with the day. Not a dramatic agreement, not a conscious one, simply a physiological one. Here is something that will work slowly and steadily, and the body, receiving it, did not panic, did not surge and crash, did not ask again for an hour or 2 or 3. It simply continued. It worked. The reason comes down to something that anyone can feel, but that most people have never had explained to them in physical terms. When you eat something that releases its energy quickly, something refined, something that the body processes in a short burst, your system responds in kind. It rises to meet that energy, handles it rapidly, and then finds itself on the other side of that transaction with nothing left in the account and an urgency that feels, from the inside, exactly like hunger, even if it has only been 2 hours since you ate. You reach for something. You feel the morning slipping. The concentration that was there an hour ago has gone soft at the edges, and the simplest tasks have acquired a slight friction that they did not have before. This is not a character failing. It is the predictable result of energy arriving too fast and leaving too soon. The body was designed to manage a more gradual relationship with food, one where something consumed in the morning would still be present in a meaningful way at noon, still present in a diminished way by mid-afternoon. That kind of extended presence is what fermented grain provided, and the reason it provided it is rooted in 2 things working together. The first is what fermentation did before the drink was ever consumed. By breaking the grain's starches down in advance, the fermentation process ensured that the body did not need to spike its own response to handle them. What entered the digestive system was already partially transformed, already more accessible, already moving toward a form the body could use, but slowly. Because the suspension was thick, and the gut moved it gradually rather than rushing it through. The result was energy that arrived in a long, low, steady stream rather than a single concentrated wave. Ancient laborers felt this as durability. They could work the 3rd hour and the 5th hour and the 7th without the floor dropping out. The second thing is the vinegar, or the natural sourness produced by the fermentation itself. Acetic acid, the active quality in vinegar, does something simple and powerful when consumed with a meal or a drink. It slows the rate at which the stomach empties its contents into the small intestine. In plain terms, it keeps food in process longer. It extends the window. The sourness that early drinkers might have noticed, that slight edge on the tongue, was not incidental. It was functional. And the body experienced it as a break on the process, and the break meant that the energy from the grain arrived later, in smaller amounts, over a longer stretch of time. Together, these two qualities produced something that no modern fast breakfast replicates. Not because the ingredients are exotic or the preparation is sophisticated, but because the process required time. And the modern food system has largely abandoned time as an ingredient. What you gave up when you stopped fermenting grain before consuming it was not flavor, not tradition, not cultural heritage in the abstract sense. You gave up steadiness. You gave up the long, quiet, stable presence of a morning that did not collapse on itself before noon. The laborer in the field felt it as simple capability. The ability to work, to think, to carry weight, to make decisions, to stay in the body rather than being pulled toward the next desperate input. This was not medicine, and it was not a supplement. It was just the right preparation of the most common grain in the ancient world, consumed by people who could not afford the alternative of not making it to midday. At the moment recorded in the Gospel of John, Jesus had been on the cross for hours. What the body undergoes in crucifixion is beyond the reach of ordinary description. Dehydration, blood loss, the progressive failure of the systems that keep a person conscious and present. A soldier standing nearby reached for his own vessel, soaked a sponge, lifted it on a hyssop branch, and offered it. The gesture is recorded with almost no commentary. The soldier did not deliberate. He did not offer something precious or unusual, and he offered what he himself was carrying. His own ration, the common drink of Roman military men, the posca that every soldier on that hillside would have had with him because it was standard provision. The thing that got you through a long day of standing in the sun, doing hard, thankless work. That detail is the one worth staying with. Not the theological weight of the moment, which is real and enormous, but the material fact underneath it. This was so ordinary that a soldier's reflex was to share it. It was what you reached for when someone needed to endure. The same drink appears earlier in the biblical record, in a field in Bethlehem during the harvest. Boaz notices Ruth working in his field, a foreign woman gleaning what the reapers leave behind, and he speaks to her with a kindness that is practical before it is sentimental. He tells her to stay close to his servants, to drink from the water they have drawn, and at the meal break, he invites her to come and eat, to dip her bread in the soured drink that the workers are sharing. She comes, she eats, she is satisfied. The drink is not named with ceremony. It is simply what the harvest workers had, the soured provision of people doing physical work in the heat of a Judean summer. And Boaz's act of inclusion is expressed partly through the sharing of it. These two appearances are centuries apart and worlds apart in their circumstances. A harvest field, a hilltop execution. But they share the same underlying fact. The drink was wherever ordinary people needed to stay standing. It was not kept for special moments. It was the provision of endurance. And endurance was the constant need of people who worked with their bodies in the ancient world. From the harvest rows to the military lines, to the roads and the construction sites and the fishing boats, this was what people carried when they needed to last. The distance between that world and this one is real, but the distance between that drink and your kitchen is much smaller than it sounds. There are two ways to come back to this, and both of them are worth knowing. The first is the closer historical version, and it begins the night before. Take rolled oats, or, if you can find it, pearl barley, the grain that ancient preparations most commonly used. A half cup of grain to roughly 4 cups of water, loosely covered, left at room temperature overnight, or for as long as 12 hours if your kitchen runs cool. By morning, the liquid will have begun to sour slightly. The grain will have softened and swelled, and when you strain it, not completely, but loosely, so that some of the grain particles remain suspended, the liquid will have thickened slightly and taken on a pale, cloudy color. Into that liquid, stir a small amount of raw apple cider vinegar. Start with 1 teaspoon. Taste it. The sourness should be present, but not sharp. A background note, not a punch. If the taste is too mild, add a little more. A small pinch of salt brings the whole thing into focus. What you have in the jar now is not ancient Posca exactly. You cannot reconstruct that with modern grain in a modern kitchen, but it is an honest approximation of the logic behind it. The fermentation is gentle but real. The grain suspension is there, and the vinegar extends what the fermentation began. When you drink it in the morning, before anything else, it settles in the stomach with that quiet weight that most morning drinks do not have. It does not taste like a pleasure drink. It tastes like something that means business, slightly sour, slightly earthy, substantial in a way that makes the first hour of the morning feel different than it does after coffee on an empty stomach. If you do not have 12 hours, or if you want to understand the functional logic before committing to the overnight version, there is a simpler path. Steep a tablespoon of oat flour or very finely ground rolled oats in a cup of warm water for 10 to 15 minutes, stirring until it thickens slightly. Add a teaspoon of raw apple cider vinegar, a small pinch of salt, and if you want the closest approximation to the ancient flavor, a small squeeze of lemon. The fermentation is not there in the same way, but the thickened grain suspension and the acetic acid are, and the body will respond to them in the same general direction, more slowly, more steadily, with less of the spike and retreat that follows a lighter morning drink. In both versions, the time to drink it is before the long stretch of the day begins. Before the first task, before the first meeting, before the morning has made its demands. Drink it the way the ancient laborer drank it, not as a ritual, not with ceremony, but as preparation. Sit with it for a few minutes if you can. Let the stomach receive it before you ask it to carry you anywhere. What you should notice, if you give it a few mornings, is not a dramatic change. It is a quieter thing than that. The hollow urgency at 10 o'clock does not arrive on schedule. The concentration holds a little longer. The hand does not reach for something sweet at the first opportunity. The morning simply continues, as it was always supposed to. This is not a discovery. It is a return, and the distinction matters. What this episode has been circling from the beginning is not a forgotten superfood or an ancient secret that modernity buried. It is something simpler and more human than that. It is a very ordinary solution to a very ordinary problem. How to stay standing through a long day that people in the ancient world had already worked out, were using without ceremony. And passed down through generations until the chain was broken, not by a single decision, but by the slow accumulation of convenience and refinement and speed. The hollow urgency named in the hook is not a personal failing. It is a structural gap, and the gap has a specific shape. It is shaped exactly like the absence of slow-releasing fermented grain from the beginning of the day. The steadiness that ancient laborers carried with them was not a byproduct of harder living or stronger constitution. It was a byproduct of a simple preparation that they made the night before and poured into a vessel in the morning. You can do the same thing. Not as an act of historical reenactment, but as an act of recovery, of reaching back past the noise of modern eating advice and finding something that was working long before anyone needed to explain why. If this is the kind of recovery that feels worth making, stay close to this channel. There is more here. More food, more drink, more daily provision from the ancient world that turns out to be quietly, practically alive. Leave a comment with what you find when you try the drink. The best conversations here are the ones where people bring what they actually tasted back to the table. The laborer's vessel was simple. The morning was long. The drink held them. It can hold you too.